Alright, so here we have two new motors from BrotherHobby, 2307 2500 kV and 2307 2700 kV. So these are quite interesting motors because BrotherHobby was awesome enough to stamp my nickname on it. So these are the EngineerX motors. So it's quite an honor to have my nickname on a motor. So I'd like to really thank BrotherHobby for giving me the honor to have my nickname there. That's really cool, and I very much appreciated that BrotherHobby contacted me about a month or so ago. I think I have to check the emails. So they contacted me regarding a motor, and they asked me for suggestions as to what I like to see on the motor. So the first thing I mentioned to them was the bearing. So I told them absolutely it would have to have the 4x9x4 bearing. Just simply because it's a sturdier bearing, it takes the loads much better than the smaller bearings. Bigger is better in this case. So the 4x9x4 bearing is proven to be a beefy and a strong bearing, so it takes a lot of abuse without degrading its performance. So definitely had to have the 4x9x4 bearing. So they added that. Then another thing they asked me was about KVs and motor size. So I thought about it, and being that BrotherHobby didn't yet have a 2307 on their lineup, that was one of the reasons. So I suggested why not a 2307. And then also I was thinking more like a freestyle type of motor. So I thought 2307 would be able to handle like any of the 5-inch props, and it still kind of keep the weight reasonable. Not ultra light, but reasonable weight, under 40 grams for sure. So I asked him for a 2307. And as far as KV, I thought 2500 would be a good KV, since that would be kind of like a middle ground, higher than the usual low KV of 2300. So kind of like midways. And then the 2700, of course, would be the high KV, just for those people that like the high KV. Put them on the 5-inch props and an ultralight, and then you have a speed demon with that KV. So I thought those two KVs would cover most of the pilot's specifications for KV. After that, I thought about it, and I should have asked him to make a 2200, 2100 kV motor for people that like to run 5S and 6S. BrotherHobby is very receptive to user suggestions, so if people like this motor enough, and if just a few people ask for a lower KV, they'll certainly do the windings for lower KV. So anyways, this motor has quite a few of the new features in motors, and they've gone back to some of the traditional features. As far as the armature, as you can see, it's a full enclosed armature on the motor. The base is a full base, and they said the reason is just because they wanted to keep the shape of the motor. As you can see, it's a round shape, kind of like an orb. Don't go and call it EngineerX, it's not the EngineerX, it's EngineerX, so no eggs here. So it's kind of like an orb. So they wanted to keep that round shape to it, and they thought the base would add to that. Because I did ask him if they would think about doing a naked bottom, and they did also tell me that they were gonna try to reduce the weight. So I don't know if they're gonna accomplish that for sure. It's gonna be interesting to see if on the final release version, if it's gonna be the same weight or if it's gonna be the reduced weight. But it's not gonna be by that much, maybe a gram or so. That's good. BrotherHobby is always trying to maximize the weight savings, maximize performance any which way they can. So as far as the components of the motor, you can see it's got the single piece shaft, and I don't have the exact specs for the motor yet, so I don't know yet if the shaft is titanium, but it certainly feels and looks like a titanium shaft. It is not magnetic, so I would think BrotherHobby was gonna use the titanium shaft since they use that in a lot of their premium motors. So I would think that's a titanium shaft, and that's also a fully hollow shaft. So I already removed the screw. I'll show it to you on the other motor here, the 2700. So it also has a retaining screw for the shaft with a brass washer there, so that's good. And fully hollow shaft, as you can see there. And they did these ridges here on the bell ring, and so that's to shed heat. So it's not really active cooling, but you know, it increases the area of the surface here so that you get a better heat dissipation. So that's gonna help cooling, so that's good. And as you can see there, it's using this nice cool looking navy blue color, anodized color, so that I asked them to do that color. I thought, you know, it's one of my favorite colors, so I thought I'd request that color, and it actually came out pretty good. I quite like it. It's a good color. It's got that texture there for the prop, so it doesn't slip. And other features, well, it's got the nice and long motor wires. Those are 20 gauge wires, and they're about 175 millimeters, so plenty long for any 5-inch and even 6-inch builds. So that's what the motor looks like compared to a 2207. And here's a side view of the motors, so you can compare the overall height, and it certainly looks a little bit chunkier than the 2306 due to the orb shape of the motor. And here it is compared to the 2207. So the 2207 is actually about the same height, overall height. So you can see there. Alright, let's get a measurement of the overall diameter. This 2307 comes in at 31.6. The 2207 seems to be the smallest diameter. That comes in at 27 millimeters. And the 2306, and that's the R5, that comes in at 28.2. So 20 versus the 2306, 28.2. So yeah, it's a few millimeters wider, and that's because of the added ridges that they're using for heat dissipation. That has to have extra area, so that's why. So a little bit wider than the other ones, but overall good looking motor. So, and one thing I was curious to check is because of the shape of the motor, I wanted to see how difficult it was or easy it was to install the prop, because it kind of seems that it's gonna be slippery. So let's have a check on that. And that's the nut that comes with the motor. It's a low profile nut. So that's I installed it on this skinny arm on this quad. So usually I'll just grab the arm like so, and sometimes, you know, I use the prop for a little bit more leverage. So let's see how that works. Yeah, it seems like you're able to hold the motor no problem, and be able to tighten the prop nut as much as I usually tighten it. So that's okay. Yeah, that's okay, no problem. It's just that it seemed that it is a little bit more slippery than regular motors because of these ridges. But still, if you hold it firm enough and use the arm as leverage, like so, no issues tightening, and also no issues loosening the prop. So seems to be okay. So no problems there. And so that's how it looks mounted on arm. Alright, so let's see what the motor weighs with 175 millimeters of wires. It comes from the factory, and that comes in at 39.7. So if we cut the wires to 50 millimeters, we'll be getting rid of that much wire, about 375 millimeters of 20 gauge wire, and that weighs almost 3 grams, 2.9. So let's tare that. It goes back to 0, and let's see what the motor weighs. So 36.7. Keep in mind that's a 2307 size motor. So 36.7, it's a little bit more than most other motors that we're used to seeing, the 2207s, 2306s. But you gotta keep in mind that's a 2307, so a taller stator. So usually when you go taller, that's actually when you gain more weight, because you have to increase the height of the, not only of the whole iron portion of the stator, but the magnets as well. And that's where a lot of the weight is concentrated on. So not too bad. It's not overly light, but it's reasonable, I think. So I've removed the shaft screw, so we'll pull this apart and have a look under the magnifying glass. So removing the shaft wasn't, removing the screw wasn't that difficult. Luckily they didn't use that really hard Loctite, and the screws was a good quality screw, so it was easy to put the Allen key on there, and it was easy to remove, not too bad. So they use a good screw. So now let's open that up and we'll get a closer look under the magnifying glass. Alright, so here's a close-up of the stator. As you can see, single strand wire, and looks like 0.15 laminations, so pretty thin. So that's another one of the newest features in motor technology. So it looks like they're using all of those new features. Okay, so let's have a look at the stator height, and that's right, right on the 7mm mark, so 7mm for sure. And there's the bearing, so that's one of those 4x9x4. So that's the proven strong bearing. These are NMB bearings, so that's a Japanese brand. So pretty good brand. Should be long lasting. So there we go, 9mm on the bearing, and full base, as you can see there. And the mount pattern is 16x16. So that was another one of the suggestions I had, because it seems like everybody wants to do away with 16x19. So that seems to be catching up. So everybody's doing 16x16. And here's the bell assembly with the one-piece shaft, hollow shaft, and I believe that is titanium. And the magnets, I'm not sure if these are N52, but I do believe they are. But the actual specs will be posted somewhere later on. And as you can see, something interesting, these are black magnets. So I'm waiting for BrotherHobby to put a description for this type of magnets, but pretty cool. It's not that they're burnt or anything, that's how they are from the factory. Pretty cool color, I think. Looks different. And there you can see the inside and the rigid ring, so that's for better heat transfer. And as far as air gap, you can't really see it. Air gap is pretty good. It's not overly tight or loose, so pretty much similar to the R5 2207, but it's hard to see because of the full base that we have here. So these motors are pretty much constructed the same way as the R5 2207, so pretty good overall quality of construction on the motors, as usual from BrotherHobby. So I expect them to perform pretty well. So they should fall between the 2207 and the 2407 performance. So definitely should be slightly better than the 2207 and 2306 motors. So we'll check that out shortly on the thrust stand. So let's see what this can do on the thrust stand. Alright, so here are the thrust test results for the new motor from BrotherHobby, the EngineerX 2307 2700 kV. This motor came in at a slightly higher 2770 kV, so not too bad. Slightly higher kV could be good for some people that enjoy flying high kV motors. Okay, so I went ahead and tested on 3S and 4S based on that kV. And I started with these two props. The reason I included these two props, I had tested them before. Previous motors, I've tested the Racecraft 5051 and also the GenFan Flash. But the reason I included them here is because I've been getting a lot of questions from people why I don't test the new style of props, such as the GenFan Flash. So here's the reason why. These props have been mainly designed to be used in fast forward flight. So on the static thrust test, they don't do well. It's going to be deceiving results because they're going to show them to be poor performers. But we all know that, for instance, this GenFan Flash, it's a favorite of a lot of people. And we know that this prop is actually quite fast, even faster than the 5043. And as you can see here, it's showing that it's making a lower thrust. And that's because, you know, this prop has been, as I said, both these props have been designed to work best when there's moving air through the blades. So in static, they just don't do well. The results give misleading information. So that's why I tested them a long time ago. And after seeing how they perform on the static thrust, I just decided not to test them because these tests just don't show their actual performance. So that's why. But I thought I'd include them here just to kind of show people. So the other usual props that I usually test is the 5045 BN two blade prop. That's the only two blade prop I've been testing. So 1600 grams on this motor, pretty respectable thrust. Then onto the 5043, slightly higher at 1644, and amps are Fairly manageable. Keep in mind that these amps are gonna be higher than actual amps when you fly by about 35 to even 40% in some cases. So that's still quite manageable. You know, all you have to do is multiply these by 0.6. Continuing on to the props, I also included this new HQ 5045 just to see the difference between the 5043, and as you can see, there's a slight difference, extra 50 grams of thrust. So the other 5-inch props that are more aggressive, over 1700 grams, so that's pretty astounding thrust results there. So that's pretty high, actually, pretty high thrust. But it's to be expected out of this 2307 motor and this high kV, so that's pretty good. Then onto the 6-inch props, not quite reaching 2 kilograms, but pretty close. It got pretty close right here with the 6045 and the 6040, so almost the same thrust. But we can see the 6040 is a little bit more efficient. So 1990, just 10 grams off the 2 kilogram mark, so pretty good. Alright, so here's a quick interesting comparison of the 2307 2700 against 2207 2700. So pretty similar kV actually. The measured kV is only off by about 50 kV points. Looking at the 5043 by 3, we can see the 2307 is just slightly ahead, only about 40 grams off of the 5043. And as we move up to the more aggressive props, let's see if the larger stator takes over. So yeah, we're seeing an increase in thrust once we go to the more aggressive props. So right here it's 57 grams difference, and with the 5045 then we see a larger jump in difference of thrust, advantage for the 2307, and we should see a larger gap as we go to the larger props like the 5545BN. Here we can see about 100 grams difference, and the 6045 also we see a little bit more than 100. So anyway, that's an interesting comparison. As you can see, the advantage of the larger stator is showing right here. More thrust and a slightly better efficiency for the same thrust. Alright, so that's the thrust test results for this motor. Thanks for watching, and until the next video,